Test match rugby, folks, and it's Australia up against Wales. I feel like these two teams are pretty evenly matched, and it makes for good viewing. This game certainly had a few errors. There was a seemingly fair amount of dew on the field. That's the way Jake Gordon described it at halftime. We saw some errors, we saw some tries, we saw some penalties, a couple of lead changes as well. But we'll go through it and you guys can let us know your thoughts. But certainly the first game with Joe Schmidt in charge, I feel like it was a relatively straightforward game plan in terms of the attacking structure largely being pretty direct. They weren't trying to spin the ball too much early on. They wanted to keep things pretty tight. We did see them try a few kind of intricate moves where they would pop the ball out the back to try and change direction early on, but only a couple of times. I feel like it's the kind of thing they're going to build into their attack the more Joe Schmidt spends time with them. Their scrum was monstrous in the first half. And, they scored a couple of nice tries through the backs to finish winning it, 25-16 for Wales. They certainly had a few chances going begging, and they'll not be happy when they see the amount of ball that they kind of coughed up during this game. Like, the stats don't make pretty reading in that regard, but I think there's certainly positives to take for Wales in terms of the defensive shift they put in to really limit the Aussies, 2 to 3 tries that they ended up scoring. Also, before we start kind of go through the events of the game and the stats and whatnot, what a crowd. Great to see a crowd like that in Sydney. Haven't seen a home win for the Wallabies in like 4 years. The Waratahs in Super Rugby have been pretty awful. I mean, Wales, with all due respect in terms of the current rugby standings, aren't the biggest draw to get kind of casual fans into a game. If the All Blacks come to town, certainly you get a lot of expat bloody Kiwis over to the game. But nah, man, some Welsh fans there and a good Aussie rugby crowd, which was really, really pleasing to see. The Welsh got their points on the board first, though, when Slipper put in a grass cutter tackle. Not a good look. Ben Thomas slots the first points of the game 3-0. We see Jake Gordon putting in a few big box kicks, which is basically why I think he's been picked. Joe Schmidt talked about his crisp pass and his big boot. He was putting it a fair bit of that big boot early, and when the Wallabies had their first chance with a penalty, they first went for touch, but second time went for the 3 points. So 3 points apiece relatively early on, fairly kind of tentative start. We did see Kellaway get a big line break, and he was stopped by fullback Liam Williams, which was a one of these examples of kind of that desperation in the Welsh defence, which was pretty pleasing from their point of view, although not so pleasingly was the fact that the reason the Wallabies were able to make that attack is because not long earlier, the Welsh attack had basically passed the ball directly into touch, which was free possession for the Wallabies. So maybe Ben Thomas, not quite finding his man there. That is him stepping up to number 10 at international rugby. But then not long later, we also saw Lolesio from the Wallabies basically drop a ball on cold. No reason to knock that one on, just a basic error. So both guys, Lolesio has been an international team for a while, but he's been out of the Wallabies picture, at least under Eddie Jones. So it was maybe him kind of getting up to speed with international rugby again too. But it didn't really matter because that first big Wallaby scrum, which got them 3 points, directly came from that Lolesio knock on. So it ended up kind of being a beneficial one for the Wallabies having knocked that one on. So Tupou helps monster the Welsh scrum, makes it a 6 points to 3 lead for the Wallabies. And Wales from here really do concede too many penalties. Not just the scrum, but around the park as well, to the point where the ref warns them that the next guy is going to go, and we're only 18 minutes in. That's a troubling one, and sure enough, the Wallabies, with those direct carries, like I mentioned, keeping it pretty simple, not spreading it wide early, guys just, trucking it up, not too far from the side of the ruck, keeping the forwards close so they're not going to get isolated, they're not going to get turned over, because you look at this Welsh forward pack, and there's a lot of guys who love a pilfer in this pack. They keep it direct. Jeremy Williams goes close, and then Tupou goes over. So 13 points to 3 lead, and it's a yellow card for Wales because Gareth Thomas, they had advantage the Wallabies in that kind of phases of trucking it up. Gareth Thomas had been pinged, I think it was for offside. So 10 points down and a man down. It's not looking like great news for Wales. However, credit to them, they wrestled the momentum straight back into it, and it's the Wallabies who start conceding kind of penalty after penalty. And interestingly, a lot of sides, when they've got a man in the bin and they get given a penalty in opposition territory, will opt for a 3. I mean, if it goes well for you, you get 3 points and you've killed a minute of the yellow card at least. And even if you don't get the 3 points, you're still down the opposition end and you've killed a minute of the yellow card. But nope, Wales not going for it. They wanted to go for touch, and it ended up getting them a try. Heck of a maul. That's an unbelievable maul. Like as good as the Tom Wright try is later on in the game, and that's a proper peach. This maul from Wales. What a unit. They almost got 2, but the second one got chalked off in the second half. But man, what a maul try. So suddenly, we're 13-10, and Fraser McReight's been put in the bin for collapsing that maul. So we're back to even Stevens in terms of the players on the field, 14 and 14. There's only 3 points in the game. That is a heck of a turnaround from Wales when they had virtually no momentum. But that's the final scoring of the first half, 13-10. It's not like both sides didn't have their chances, but they both had a lot of errors. A lot of knock-ons out on the full. Wales had a 50-22, which they didn't capitalise on. The Wallabies had another big scrum, which got them a penalty, which they didn't capitalise on. So, yeah, a few too many errors, but I feel like the Wallabies will be the more disappointed of the two to only be 3 points up, given that they had 62% possession, 58% territory, 126 run meters to 45, like 1 clean break to none. The Wallabies had all the stats to be more than 3 points up, and the penalty count's high. 7 by the Wallabies, 8 by Wales in one half of rugby. Given that teams like to try and keep it below 10 for a full game, that's a high penalty count. Second half starts, and maybe good news for Wales is Tupou doesn't come out on the field for the second half. Also, Gareth Thomas doesn't spend much time on the field in the second half for Wales either. So changes at scrum time means the scrum is a little bit more even, I feel like, in that second half. But it's a solid start from Wales, man. They could have had a try early if a scrum move had gone a little bit better. It's a little bit lackluster, but they do get a penalty to make it 13 points apiece. And basically, the game starts again, doesn't it? We're second half in. The scoreboard is even. We're back to even Stevens in terms of the guys on the field. So what's going to happen? Well, the Wallabies chuck the kitchen sink at the Welsh defence, but Chiunza is able to win a penalty at the breakdown after Jake Gordon gets himself isolated after about 17 phases. That's a hell of a defensive shift from the Welsh. But that was the kind of direct, very simple, mostly kind of one-off runners style that Wales were kind of mopping up. When we did see them shift it, Daugunu, he just gassed Grady, running at an angle, cutting across the field on the wrong wing for him, off his own wing, cutting across field, is able to slide over for a try. Jake Gordon had mentioned at halftime that the field is wet. And he was right, because Daugunu had no right to slide as far as he did. I mean, Grady caught up to him, to be fair. He was initially beaten, did well to come back and tackle him, but with that slide on the field, Daugunu able to go over for a try. So, 18-13. Wallabies back in front, missed conversion. And then there's a few, if you're a Welsh fan, you'd be frustrated, man. Like Aaron Wainwright, line break, just gets tackled, and Wales lose the ball. You see Wainwright pound the turf because he's really frustrated because it was a key moment. They did win a penalty not long later, opt for touch and go for a maul again, which looked to have scored them a hell of a try. But got TMO'd for a bit of obstruction, which was unfortunate because that maul, again, both of them had just come on. He was the guy who looked to have scored it, but lucky let off for the Aussies. I think that's a game changer. If the Wales get that one, I think they're right back in this game, but they don't. And then, I mean, the Wallabies probably should have scored in reply. They also blew their own try when they were knocking on the door. Lolesio calls for the ball after the forwards have been knocking on the door. He cross-kicks it for Kellaway, but it's just slightly too big. I feel like maybe if that's in the Super Rugby, Lolesio puts that one on a dime, but not quite at international level. Griffin wins a great penalty at the breakdown for Wales, which gets them a chance to kick 3 points to make it 18-16. But the game-defining moment, which basically takes it beyond Wales's reach, is the Tom Wright try. It is a thing of beauty. Like, the game had been a little bit frustrating at times with the knock-ons and whatnot, but as I said, wet kind of makes sense. First game for the Wallabies, second game for Wales, but they've had a couple of weeks off. Tom Wright, if you were frustrated by the knock-ons, makes you forget about any of that. gas. He puts the gas past Tompkins. He steps Grady. He's got this ear-to-ear smile. 25-16. That is the final score. That is a hell of a try. I mean, Wales dominated the possession from then until the rest of the game in search of the kind of the chance to get themselves back in the game, but just couldn't quite get it done. They had another near miss try when Costello put a dink through for Hathaway, but his kick was also just slightly too big. So yeah, it's not like Wales didn't have their chances. They had that try chalked off at maul time, which, as I said, was probably game defining in terms of the momentum, but a couple of individual brilliance tries from Daugunu and Wright certainly gave the Wallabies what they wanted in getting Joe Schmidt's campaign as Wallabies coach a good start. Possession 56-44, territory 52-48, both of those in favour of the Wallabies. The Wallabies had 3 clean breaks to 1. They had 5 turnovers, 1 to 3. They didn't have to make as many tackles. That's what happens when you got more ball. Wales had to make 189 to Wallabies 112, but both sides tackled in the kind of 90% range, which is exemplary. Certainly more than we've seen in other games recently. But the one for Wales, man, turnovers conceded 16 to Australia's 9. And you've had 44% of the ball. So you've had less ball, but coughed up a lot more ball. The line-out didn't operate that well. I think it was at 75%, whereas the Wallabies were in the 90s. The Wallabies kicked it a fair bit more. Like I mentioned, Jake Gordon's boot was certainly getting a bit of a workout. But, yeah, pleasing one for the Wallabies. And as I said, their attack is only going to get more kind of strings to that bow the more time they spend with Joe Schmidt. Individuals, Wainwright, man, had a bloody good game. 5 defenders beaten from him. That's just kind of what he does, isn't it? I mean, tackles-wise, some of these Welsh players, Griffin made 27, Tunes made 22, Raffle made 22. Yeah, Jeremy Williams made 13 for the Wallabies, but man, the Welsh guys were asked to do some defensive shifting. I mean, for the Wallabies, you had Valetini with 10 carries. Daugunu had 9. Paisami had 6. Faessler had 5. A lot of these kind of direct carries up the guts. High work rate guys trying to keep the ball as much as they could away from the Welsh hands. But yeah, it sets us up with a really interesting game 2. Wallabies will need to watch that Welsh maul because that looks deadly if you're going to give them a maul or a line out from close range. They could well punish you. And yeah, you need to watch those Wallabies outside backs because there's certainly some magic in them if they can get themselves into even half a yard of space. You guys let us know your thoughts on the game. I'm going to go take a quick nap for the next kind of 3 hours until the Irish take on the South Africans. If you're looking for something to do between now and then, why don't you check out 2 Cents on Tour? That's my other channel. I'll put it down in the description. There's less rugby on there, but go check it out. If it's not as good as the rugby stuff, you can tell me stick to rugby. If it's decent, let me know in the comments there. Also, let me know your thoughts on the Wallabies' victory over Wales. Where do you see the 2 teams? How do you see them kind of going in game number 2? And yeah, I will talk to you guys again soon. See you later.